Hello, this is Benny Tadella. I am the head of ACI Secure e-commerce solution, and thank you for joining our session. I will be talking about our secure e-commerce solution, the capabilities, as well as the types of challenge that we're solving for our customers. When we look at the industry today, merchants are facing a lot of challenge and they're solving a lot of problems. But the good thing is a lot of those problems are being directed to what the consumer sees as a challenge. So the consumer's experience and the need to have a differentiating, frictionless, almost non-inventable payments is driving what merchants are doing today. So it's really important to look closely at what consumers are expecting. And the green circle that you look in the middle shows some of the paradigm shifts that are incorporated in the consumer's experience today. When you look at what's happening in the social media, but not just social media, in general, contextual payments or payments happening in just as we live our life. So for example, if I am going through my Instagram page, Facebook page, and I look at something that I really want and like, I don't want to do another hop to figure out where to get it and then put it on my card and pay for it. I just want it to happen right there and right now. But that also transcends into our home. We're seeing payments that happen in your fridge. When your fridge runs out of grocery, your fridge is smart enough to order your grocery. So contextual payment is becoming the consumer's expectation, payment happening right as they live their life. And of course, the drive of improvement in the technology sector, cloud computation, 5G, really driving almost the explosion of IoT devices, which makes every device we interact with smarter. Is also, again, driving the expectation on the consumer type when and how and where they will conduct their commerce, their payment transactions. All of this has been accelerated by the pandemic. It, of course, is improper to talk these days without mentioning COVID and what has happened pandemic, because it has truly changed our life. That has accelerated this digital innovation, the digital transformation that has been happening in the industry over the past year. And again, the swing of transactions from being face-to-face inside the store to being digital, the digitization of the store, where instead of using your card, using your terminal device and so on, consumers are now using their mobile devices, their wearables, but sometimes even just walking out with the goods, picking up the books and going out, because the merchant has already established a way to detect who they are, what they need, and what items that they've picked up. So this need for experience, smooth, frictionless experience by the consumer is driving merchants to focus on how do I accelerate my revenue conversion by providing a frictionless checkout process. So conversion, meaning I decline less, I identify my fraud appropriately, and then I provide optimal authorization path. I provide the payment types, so that alternative payment types, right credit cards to process, right payment instruments, and so on, so that when the consumer is ready to pay, I can actually accept that. Knowing the customer so that I can give him tailored experience, regardless of the channel they choose to engage with me. Right, having the right risk management strategy in place, both from a brand protection, to avoiding things like breach, but also having the right PCI compliance so that I reduce the burden that I have, so that I can invest my effort on innovating and meeting the customer's experience while managing my cost and the growing complexity of the payment industry and the payment ecosystem has been at the forefront of the merchant, especially in the e-commerce space. So this is why when we think about our solution, our e-commerce solution for the merchant, we bring three distinct value propositions. When we see at the merchant, they are really in the middle of being pressured by this consumer experience we talked about, which is frictionless, ever easy, smooth. But then on the other hand, you have the industry, which is growing more complex, lots of issues. With the swing of digital transaction, the rise for fraud has also been significant. So fraud strategy, all this is putting the merchant in the middle to figure out how do I do this appropriately. And hence we bring to the table the ability to abstract out all this complexity and solve all these big problems while giving the merchant the key to innovate and meet those consumers' demand and expectation for journeys, for new types of innovative solution in the checkout process. And then, while we do that, we also help the merchant retain freedom and flexibility and the power of choice, especially who they choose to do business with, which acquire, the integrators, even how many acquirers that they integrate with, or payment providers. The idea of payment orchestration is at the forefront of our solution. So we provide a simple payment orchestration engine that allows the merchant to retain their freedom and flexibility, who they integrate and how they integrate with. And then ultimately, we provide a peace of mind by bringing high security bank grade data centers and solutions with a very strong and robust award-winning fraud prevention solution to ensure that every payment transaction is validated and checked, while ensuring that the right transactions are being approved and the right transaction is processed. So I'll talk about this ACI Security Card solution, where a single API integration gives access to a plethora of different services on our platform while providing hundreds of acquirers on the back end. So this secure e-commerce solution is available for both merchants as well as intermediaries. And when we think about intermediaries, we think about payment service provider for merchants. We think about acquirers, PayFacs, independent sales organizations that really leverage our solution to white label it, make it a part of their solution while servicing their merchants as well. Today, through both channels, the direct and indirect, ACI service more than 80,000 merchants while processing more than 1 billion transactions on this platform. And we are present in various verticals, starting from general retail to hospitality, travel and telecommunication, as well as digital goods. And the digital goods is, if you think about gaming, music and videos, anything that maybe a digital consumption for consumers, we are present in those verticals as well. So taking a deep dive in the solution, as I talked about earlier, you have the 3 components of the solution. We have the simplified front-end solution, which is on the page here. You are easily able to integrate your e-commerce website, your mobile application. We have a mobile SDK that allows you to embed payment in your mobile application and customize the payment journey, where payment happens, what payment type, with exact look and feel of your application. So from a consumer perspective, it is the app. It is not an embedded page. It is not a different, distinct step. It is part of the app, which really drives conversion. And once the app is deployed, when you want to actually configure additional payment types, it is not a redeployment and a recoding. It is a simple configuration on the back end that allows immediately to pop up new payment types for the consumer. But beyond your typical e-commerce side, as well as payment application, you're also able to integrate any IoT devices you might have, any B2B channels that you might have, really work with recurring transaction subscription space and optimize the approval and processing of these transactions. So I want to talk about a couple of highlights in this integration. One is our merchant developer portal, which a lot of our merchants and our customers find very useful. It is publicly available. It is a sandbox. It has lots of documentation into how to easily integrate your various channels, live examples of codes, as well as tests that you can carry on to actually try it out. In our white label solution, all of the things that you see on the page are customizable to fit into your environment as well, so that you can service your customers with your solution. But in addition to that, our copy and pay API, which is what you leverage to integrate your e-commerce site, completely descopes PCI. So your environment and your infrastructure will not have exposure to PCI elements, while at the same time have the ability to configure every bit of the component on your site. So again, from a frictionless and look and feel and consolidation of your page for the consumer, it is part of your page, while retaining that PCI compliance out of your environment. You can configure different payment types, which gets displayed for the consumer so that they can easily understand what payment types are supported, multi-currency and multilingual and globally. available as well. So once you integrate into this front end, you get access to a lot of solutions in a secure manner. It starts with our tokenization vault, which if you're leveraging our card present solution, it will be 1 vault. But even in our secure e-commerce solution, regardless of the channel you integrate, again, it will be 1 representation of the customer's credentials and the customer's payment types. We have our smart dynamic routing, which I'll talk a little bit about later, which allows you to optimize how transactions are routed to where, with how much, and increase approval and conversion rates. Our solution is one of the very first solutions in the market to be certified with 3DS 2.2, providing exemption in addition to the new 3DS 2 capability. We have account updater that drives conversion again, and making sure that the transaction that you're processing, if it is associated with a new account type, with a new card, that is obtained from the schemes. And then ultimately, one of our biggest differentiators on our solution is our fraud management solution. With this one API integration, you get access to this fraud solution that drives down your chargeback, while through our positive profiling and machine learning capabilities increases the approval and the accept rates. On the back end of our solution, we connect to more than 250 connectors around the globe in 5 continents around the world. In this range from your typical acquirers to debit networks, to the schemes, to private label providers, and then alternative method providers as well. These could be wallets, of course, the Google Pay and the Apple Pay of the world, and Amazon Pay, and so on, but also alternative methods of payment that are specific to markets such as Alipay and WeChat Pay, and so on. If you go to our global coverage page, you will get access to this site using this link that you see over here. You would get a very good searchable list of all our capabilities. You can search by country, by location, by payment type, by acquirer to see what we have available, some of which is displayed here. And this is really important, and it's becoming even more important in the marketplace for a few reasons. Recently, we conducted a study with Edgar Dunn at the end of last year, which has been published this year, which you can actually download from our website as well. A lot of merchants are finding a lot of benefits from working with multiple acquirers through payment orchestration engines such as ACI's e-commerce platform. By far, the top reason, the top benefit for that is resiliency. As I talked about earlier, the consumer's experience is the center of all strategy now, ensuring that you are there for the customer when you are ready to accept the payment. You've invested a lot of dollars to get them through the checkout by advertisement, the stocking, the employee engagement, all the optimization that you have in that checkout process. And now, when the consumer is ready to pay and has actually submitted the payment, the last thing you want is the acquirer not to be available. So resiliency is really, really important, but also controlling costs. The acquiring cost, the processing cost remains one of the biggest portions of the pie in your payment processing. So making sure that you have optimal balance between what volume goes to what acquirer, which kinds of transactions you want to process which acquirer so that you have the most optimal fee. But also when it's time to negotiate, that you knowing that you have an option gives you an upper hand in controlling cost. Today, 85% of merchants are already seeing an increase in conversion once they have multi-acquiring in place. And if you actually look at just 23% of that, they're seeing that increase just by 10%. So going from a single acquirer to a multiple acquirer has a definite benefit beyond the 2 I talked about in driving conversion for you. So our study indicated this trend is here to stay. In fact, today, when you look at the current state, more than half of both merchants, as well as merchant intermediaries, payment service providers, are already doing business with multiple acquirers. But it's not just that, they're also looking to increase their relationship. Depending on the vertical that you're engaged in, depending on whether you're a global provider or not, the needs also vary. But even within a single market, such as the US, As we know, in North America, a lot of the retailers tend to be nationalistic versus global because of the size of the market and the types of merchants there are. But even there, the average acquirers today is 8 across merchants. So there is a definite trend in an understanding of the benefit having a payment orchestration engine, the ability to do business with multiple acquirers. This is, of course, accentuated by our capability to provide dynamic transaction routing, which on the one hand, you have an intelligence built in making sure that the right transaction is going to the right destination. So when you have multiple acquirers, when you have a region-based strategy in routing transactions and so on, you need some intelligence built into switching. For example, when one of our customers, a global customer that used to do business with one global acquirer, but for a specific market, we converted and migrated traffic to a specific local acquirer so that within an 8-month period that we used for comparison, more than 42% of improvement in the conversion rate. Fantastic result. But that's not just that. You also have smart retry, which is when a transaction is initially declined, instead of accepting just as a declined transaction, which not only you would lose that revenue, but also potentially the customer because of the embarrassment you've caused and the friction that has been caused. Smart retry is the ability to resubmit transactions by looking at the transaction, what could be adjusted. It could be things like changing the MCC code to be better suited for that specific merchant, a different acquirer, and so on. And we've seen, again, transaction approval rate really increasing by doing these techniques. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a while. And ultimately is optimizing your routing for quick, frictionless, low latency approval for the customer, because customers do not want to wait when it's an e-commerce transactions. So when it comes to smart routing, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen a huge adoption. More than 66% of our customers are adopting this today. And we're seeing anywhere from 12 to 15% approval rate increases when smart routing is in place. Our integrated fraud prevention solution is all about ensuring that you convert revenue and you can sell more. And you can do this by that one integration of the API I talked about in the front end of our solution. And while you're doing that, it's not just that revenue that you are securing, but also is you're improving your customer's experience, which ultimately means you're developing a loyal customer. But approving more transactions, knowing your customer, is not good enough unless you can also reduce chargeback. And this is exactly what our solution does. It reduces your chargeback, but it also reduces your cost because the amount of transactions we flag as suspect needing manual intervention are very, very minimal. So increase conversion revenue, decrease chargeback, while ensuring that you have a great control on your cost. This is a multi-layered solution, which starts with machine learning, which actually has now a new patent pending algorithm that is in place that ensures the algorithms we have in place have a larger life cycle called incremental learning. This is really unique and different in the industry in that our models now live longer, be more effective over a period of time, and learn even in production as new fraud trends emerge. Our fraud platform is also fed by a global consortium database. So you as a merchant also benefit not only from your data and your customer and your insight, but from the global insight that we get from our customer base, as well as the fraud insight that we see, a particular and distinct, unique and differentiating portion of our solution. All right, so when you think about multi-acquirer, having dynamic transaction routing capability is really important, and our solution offers this, starting from intelligent transaction dispatching, which is all about optimizing how and where to send a transaction for ultimate approval. We've had some use cases where we've seen more than 42% increase, particularly going from a global acquirer to making sure that you do business with a local acquirer if you have a global footprint. To smart retry, where we're getting anywhere from 12 to 15% conversion rate improvement when you resubmit a transaction without the user involvement or even the merchant's involvement, by looking at the data and the types of transaction and which acquire and having backup of acquirers, etc. And ultimately, optimizing your routing route so that you have less latency, quick approval, and then not a lot of wait for the merchant, even for cross-border in some of the APMs you would have in place. And having an integrated fraud is really key through that one API, which allows you to convert more revenue. So approve more transactions, taking more transactions, less declines for the consumer, more revenue for you, which means it results in the improvement of the customer experience, ultimately beyond just that specific revenue, which also means the loyalty of the customer improves over the life cycle. But doing all this while driving down chargeback and your operational cost, because you don't have a lot that you have to manually figure out for suspect transactions. We do this through our fraud platform, which has machine learning capabilities with new improved modeling. For example, last year we've introduced around incremental learning, which means the models last longer, get smarter as they see more fraud, which has a patent pending on it. Which is fed by Global Consortium database, which is a database that contains all the insight and data that we see around the globe with thousands of merchants. This fraud solution has multiple layers, starting from the machine learning, the consortium database that I talked about, but also expert risk analysts around the globe, multi-language, multi-vertical, multi-regional capabilities that work with you to tailor specific fraud strategy for your solution and for your business needs. So sell more, lose less is our motto. And of course, our KPIs speak to that, with accept rates that are significantly above market rates. Our denies and challenge are less than the market rate, while our chargeback, which ultimately means you're approving more, but also losing less, are significantly lower than the market rate. So in summary, we provide a simple, flexible, and global solution that is secure to and bring a peace of mind for you. I would really be happy to talk with you further, as well as the team will be. Please feel free to drop by our booth, and we'll be happy to entertain your questions and have further discussions about solution and how we can solve your specific payment needs. Thank you for listening.